Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hello, and welcome to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. We are trying something a little different today, and I am actually interviewing somebody who I was introduced to through another guest, Jeff Copper, who said he is amazing. And just from the title of his podcast and website, I knew he had to be a guest, and he graciously agreed. I am talking about Dave Delaney. He is a motivational speaker, published author of New Business Networking, and host of the ADHD Wise Squirrels podcast. Known for his engaging blend of humor, storytelling, and actionable insights, Dave empowers audience to unlock their potential, embrace their unique strengths, and build meaningful connections. His signature keynote, The Root Down, offers transformative lessons on self-discovery, resilience, and embracing neurodiversity, inspired by his own ADHD journey. He's got quite a list of accomplishments that follow, which we will put in the show notes. But I'm just really excited to bring Dave on to the podcast. And I'm also going to apologize. I do have a cold, which is, I didn't want to not do this episode with you, Dave, because I know you've got a busy schedule. Trying to get you was like pinning down a squirrel. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Jami.
Sure. Well, like I said, your title was too good not to include, as you've learned through my audience, is really geared towards people who are 50 and over. And as I have to tell, not everybody is a grandparent and not everybody is a grandma, but it is a really catchy name, as is Wise Squirrels. And it tends to be more often that women went undiagnosed. So it just made more sense to say grandma. So I want to hear first a little bit about your ADHD journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I was diagnosed at 50 a couple of years ago now. So yeah, my background, I've worked in, I'm an ADHDer, right? Undiagnosed at the time. So I've had a lot of different jobs and careers, working in broadcasting, radio and television back in the day. Started podcasting in 2005. I've had multiple podcasts. So yeah, so ADHD Wise Squirrels is not my first podcast by any means, but it's definitely my most passionate one that I love doing it. But yeah, I was a speaker for Google for about 6 years. I do a lot of keynote presentations and workshops and training on communication skills, and I do coaching as well. And happy to offer your listeners and viewers, a session if they visit wisesquirrels.com. Just click coaching if you're interested.
Sure, we will put that in this.
Yeah.
Wise Squirrels. Okay, so what led you to get diagnosed? And then how did it show up for you as a child that it went unnoticed? Because I'm wondering if you might have been inattentive, because I know the little boys, I'm guessing we're close to each other's age. I'm 55, that the little boys, you could spot them, but the girls sort of went under the radar. So what made you get diagnosed? And then tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, so I was in a mastermind with a couple of entrepreneur friends. Mm-hmm. And one I knew and one I didn't know very well when we first started working together. And basically we were just kind of helping each other out with our businesses, brainstorming and problem solving and all the things, just keeping each other accountable. Yeah. And after a couple of months of doing this, one day I get a text from the guy that I didn't know quite as well. And he said, basically, do you have ADHD, in a text? And I said, no. And he said, I think you do. And he said, I do.
I'm going to pause because I run into this all the time. And I'm like, do you or don't you? What did you think when he asked you?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a surprise because I'd gone through the process several years ago of being tested for ADHD. And mainly because my wife had recommended it because she's a school teacher. And so she works with children of all types. And so certainly she'd seen it in me. And yeah, so some years ago, I had been tested and for some reason missed the memo that I'd been diagnosed with ADHD. I had no idea. And so what you're getting out of me here is the longer version, but the shorter version is that my mastermind friend who saw it in me said, you should go speak to your doctor and get tested. And so I did, because at the time I told him I don't have ADHD. And so, and I went and got tested and my doctor, did some tests and then fired up my charts and said, oh yeah, back in 2016 or whatever, you were diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm like, what? Like, how did I miss that memo? Yeah. So I didn't really focus too much on that side of things. I could have been angry and what have you, but I would never know whether it was my GP who forgot to tell me, whether I might have missed that memo, or my psychiatrist who did the testing initially failed to tell my doctor. I don't really know what happened there, but
I think, and again, just this is my speculation from my point of view, that there's not enough attention paid to it in any sort of medical school. It is, like I was just reading an article in Israel, they think it could be up to 14%, and it's not treated by a psychiatrist. It's treated by a neuro person. I can't think of the word right now. There's a head cold. I don't know if it's head cold or ADHD, but I think it's dismissed a lot. My mom, who I call the original grandma of this podcast, was 76 when I was listening to a podcast and put the pieces together that I think that she had it. My mom had been seeing a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a doctor, and nobody caught it. And, and then P.S., they confirmed it. But yeah, so it's very possible that your doctor just didn't think anything of it. So you weren't offended by it. You just was like, okay, well.
What's another few years, right? So, and to answer your question earlier, like as a child, I was very much the hyperactive boy. I was the Bart Simpson. So definitely. But yeah, again, in my childhood, I actually did see some therapists and things, but once again, I don't recall ever being diagnosed, and certainly my parents never mentioned it. So I don't know whether I was and they didn't tell me, or whether I don't honestly know the answer to that question, but I was definitely your stereotypical hyperactive, inattentive kid.
Got it. So let me ask you a question. Do you think either of your parents looking back maybe had ADHD?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Which one?
Probably both. When I think about it, my mom's still with me, not with me here, but she's in Toronto, and my dad passed away. But yeah, I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say both are probably had ADHD. Too. So well, it's like a 75-80% comorbidity, or heritability percentage, something like that. And again, I'm not a doctor, and I always say on my podcast too, I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on the internet. So
I say the same stuff that I say TV.
Take everything I say. Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. I'm sure we have. That's one of the things I love when I connect with a fellow ADHD, or they've got to come up with a better word than ADHD, or have you come up with one yet?
Wise squirrel.
Wise squirrels. Okay. So when I meet a fellow wise squirrel, there's always this connection. I actually had a luncheon last week with a woman who the manager of my company said, you two have to meet. You have so much in common. You just have to get together. It took us forever, as you can imagine, to get together. I mean, she sat down across from me, and within a minute, I'm like, do you have ADHD? Which then took us down that conversation. And turns out her sister had it, and she's like, well, tell me what that looks like. Okay. So tell me how you got to Wise Squirrels and making ADHD a career, because it sounds like you had a pretty impressive one, which also isn't surprising for somebody who has ADHD.
Yeah. So I started Wise Squirrels as a way to kind of openly share my experiences through what I was learning about my diagnosis and about ADHD in general. I'm very much like, I was a speaker for Google for about 6 years. I've worked and lived sort of online since online began, and have always been sort of a digital marketing, digital person. And so I love Web 2.0 kind of mind frame of being open and sharing. And because I started podcasting in 2005, it was a no-brainer for me to think, okay, well, let me take this to the next level and just start a podcast and speak to subject matter experts and high achievers with ADHD and learn that way. And then because I've done a lot of business coaching in the past, I started having folks reach out and say, hey, can you coach me on my career, my business? And I always say, like, I'm not an ADHD coach, but my ADHD coach at the time said, you know more than I do about ADHD at this point, because I, of course, became hyper-focused.
I was going to say, was that your hyperfixation? Because it seems to be mine.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I started doing coaching, and I do a lot of keynote presentations and training around workshops on communication skills and things. And so, I still am doing a lot of public speaking, but, one of my main talks now is called The Root Down, and that's very much about ADHD as well.
Yeah. Can you give us a good overview, or, what our listeners are of what that is, and maybe some communication tips? Because I know that's definitely an area that a lot of us Wise Squirrels struggle with.
Yeah. So, The Root Down is a 3-part presentation. The first is about knowing yourself, better understanding yourself, your strengths. The second part is about respecting yourself, and that includes self-love and self-acceptance. And then the third part is about connecting yourself, finding community, and overcoming the sort of loneliness epidemic that we're all sort of experiencing. And the presentation itself is for any group, any neurotype, it doesn't matter. But the thread line in the presentation and story is about my own ADHD diagnosis. And so part of it is about helping to remove stigmas and educate people about ADHD, so they can do the activities and the things that I talk about in that presentation. However, part of my secret sauce with it is to help educate people and also in part because I want them to, if they feel they could have ADHD, to go and get tested and get treatment if they need it. Because as Dr. Russell Barkley has said, like with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, your life expectancy can be up to 13 years less. And
I can certainly see why, with the addiction issues and the impulsivity and not getting proper sleep. I mean, I don't know about you, but my brain is constantly going, which wakes me up, and I'm not getting the proper amount of sleep. So can definitely see, I work with seniors, and, understanding what it takes to live, the healthiest life for the longest time possible. So definitely.
Yeah.
I have heard, and I want to know if you've heard this too, that it could be up to 50% of entrepreneurs have ADHD. Do you think, have you heard that? Yeah,
well, I've heard numbers. It's something like that. I mean, it's a hypothetical, right? Because obviously not every entrepreneur has been tested, so it's hard to gauge. But I've seen something like that. Like I forget the full number, but you're like 90% more likely to, or almost 100% more likely to start a business if you have ADHD. So there's a good likeliness that,
I said, because we can't work for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes difficult. Yeah, for sure. So I think, and a lot of famous entrepreneurs, everybody, brands like Virgin and Spanx and all IKEA and JetBlue and all the others, Toys R Us, like they were all sort of started by ADHDers.
Right. I remember when I thought my daughter had ADHD, and she was in 4th grade. And anyway, that's another story. But I remember going to the internet and Googling successful people with ADHD just to sort of assure her. But okay, so I have a question for you. I don't know if you were there when Penn Holderness gave the keynote address at the ADHD conference.
I was not. No, I didn't see that.
So he asked the question, he said he was asked the question if he could do the easy button, the Staples easy button, if he could turn off his ADHD and had that as an option, would he do it? So I'm going to take a pause. And when we come back, I would love to hear what your answer is. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently. And for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. So we are back with Dave Delaney of Wise Squirrels. And while we took a pause, this is such a classic ADHD story. When Dave and I had scheduled our podcast interview, I had forgotten that Monday mornings are when my lawn person comes. So I had to deal with the dog, and then we had to deal with the noise from the lawnmower. So I have taken the podcast upstairs to my 16-year-old daughter ADHD, to my 16-year-old ADHD daughter's room. So you can see the couch, which serves as the wardrobe changing station. But at least my sound is better. So thank you for your patience, Dave. And I love when these things happen with somebody who has ADHD, because they're just like, oh yeah, and when you own it and you're not embarrassed or trying to mask it, it makes your life so much better. So
yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that's also any teenage girl's room, or boys for that matter. So
actually, no, because my middle daughter has OCD.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, all right. Fair enough.
Meticulous. So it's funny because I have two children with ADHD, and the middle one has OCD. And that could be a podcast in and of itself.
Got it.
Okay. So I had left you with, if you could press the button and take it away, your ADHD, would you take it away?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably not, just because my life, like, it gets into the question of, and what a lot of people who are late diagnosed fall into, is this problem of reflecting a little too much on the what ifs or what could have been, on your past. And I think that's kind of dangerous territory and can lead to depression or depressive thoughts, at least. And so while there are certainly different not changes, but there's certainly, had I known and I had ADHD, or had I not had ADHD at all, my life would have obviously changed, and in parts perhaps for the better, but also it wouldn't have landed me here in Nashville with my amazing best friend wife of nearly 23 years, and two incredible kids, so, and a really cute dog as well. So yeah, I suppose not.
Well, I am so glad that you said that, because that's such a big part of what I'm trying to do with, seniors who are discovering their ADHD, and they have been left out of the ADHD conversation. I mean, I'm very much you pick up a magazine anywhere, or you listen to a book that, even Penn Holderness ADHD is awesome. Nobody gets into what it looks like for seniors, but there's this term that I love. It's called gerotranscendence. And it's Erik Erikson describes it as the 9th stage of life, where we are evaluating the life that we've lived and, making peace with our choices and where we are in our relationships. And I think for people to discover that they have ADHD, who maybe their whole lives have felt different, or what's wrong with me, or why can't I keep it together, or the shame that comes with just knowing you're different, but not knowing why. So that's a big part of my platform with Grandma Has ADHD.
Yeah, so I think it's important not to reflect too negatively on the past. I mean, you can think back at stuff, but I don't think it's worth doing that. Sure.
So what would your tips be if, I always like to leave people better than they started when they tuned into the podcast. What would you say to somebody who is, either newly diagnosed or suspects they have ADHD, or a lot of adult children who are like, oh, I'm sure my parent has it, but I can't have that conversation?
Well, so first of all, if you go to wisesquirrels.com, there is an assessment there, and it's free, and I don't see the results or anything like that. So anyone can go there and try the assessment for themselves. It's unscientific. So, I mean, it's still, it'll give you an idea. But the most important thing is that if you think you have ADHD, just to go and see your doctor to get tested, and you can, speak to your GP about that. Important point, though, that I always say is, before that, maybe ask your doctor what his or her views are or thoughts are on ADHD, because there are still a small percentage of quacks out there who don't believe in ADHD or something. And if that's your doctor and you don't know, they may also not believe in cancer or diabetes or something. So maybe find a new doctor if they don't. So I would start with that question. What are your thoughts about ADHD? And then say, I think I might have ADHD and I'd love to be properly tested and diagnosed. And if I am, then to get the treatment that I need.
So that's interesting you bring that up, because with seniors, because of polypharmacy, a lot of them really cannot go on medication. So I actually say, does it matter if you have it or not? If you think you have it, if it seems like these things are consistent, there's still tools that you can put in place. I call it a scaffolding. And what I'm also noticing is a lot of the traits that I have as someone with ADHD, the seniors that I talk to, like the Swiss cheese memory, forgetting words, the memory, short-term memory issues, that's just normal aging. And so what I say is we should just be thinking about universal design when it comes to our brain. And what is it that we need to create a successful, easier life?
Yeah. And I think for seniors, you raise a good point there. First of all, in order to be diagnosed with ADHD, part of it has to be that it disrupts your life, that you're having challenges with your life. And so if you're not having challenges and you're a senior, yes, we have challenges as we get older, certainly as you're saying with like short-term memory, for example, but any ADHD treatment like medication or whatever is not going to cure your ADHD. There's nothing to cure. It's just the way we are. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't think any sort of medication, for example, is going to help you necessarily with that so much that I know of. So I think it's important to consider whether it is disrupting your life. And if it is, then it is worth getting diagnosed, or just if you want to know. But as far as like taking stimulants, medication for ADHD, I don't know enough about what works or doesn't work along other medication that you may already be on. So, and of course your doctor would figure that out for you.
Yeah. So you know what? I was listening to one of your podcasts and you mentioned that you had started meditating. And I wanted to ask you about that because I know it is so good for us and I cannot do it. It's torture for me. So how did you make that happen for yourself?
Yeah. So I've dabbled with it all my life, but started taking it very seriously in 2020 when sort of the world was imploding, both on a personal level with, we had a tornado damage our house and things. And then, of course, everything else going on in the world, pandemic and so on. So because of the stress of everything, I decided I'm going to take it seriously and start meditating daily. I used an app called Waking Up. It's a podcaster person, Sam Harris, who I really enjoy. He has an app called Waking Up. And so it's basically 10-minute guided meditations you do every day. There's a lot of confusion about meditation as far as in mindfulness, as far as like, well, to your point, like you said, you can't do it. I would push back and argue that you could
if I wanted to.
Well, it's not just that. If let's say you're washing some dishes and you look out of the window and you look at your nicely fresh cut lawn and maybe your dog out there. And just for a moment, you look at that and you think, gosh, I'm lucky to have this home and someone doing my lawn. And gosh, I got a cute dog. Mm-hmm. Like that is mindfulness. That's you pausing for a moment in your day where you could be thinking of all the things you need to do and all the chaos and maybe bad thoughts or whatever. But for a moment, you're thinking of something positive and you've stopped or slowed your mind enough to kind of think about the moment. That's called mindfulness. You're being mindful. And meditation teaches you, there are many different types of meditation, but meditation, one of the main things it teaches is mindfulness. And it's this idea of trying to pause and slow down and be present and be mindful, as opposed to being mindless, which is every other moment that we're just going through life. So it's not so much, one of the things I learned from Sam Harris's app, going through the Waking Up app, is he mentioned like that when you're trying to meditate and you think of something, instead of like beating yourself up about that, let it play out like a short film in your mind. And so, for example, like if you think, okay, I've got to walk the dog. I've got to walk the dog today. And you think this as you're trying to actually sit down and focus on your breath or look at whatever and meditate. And suddenly you start thinking, I got to walk the dog. I can't meditate. Instead, think about walking the dog and picture in your mind, like picture yourself walking your dog, like exactly what you have to do to walk the dog. So I've got to get the leash. I've got to get the dog on the leash. I've got to get the poop bags. I've got to get my shoes on, and then got to go outside and bring the keys, right? They got to lock the house, walk around the block. We're walking, maybe the dog poops, you pick up the poop, hopefully, and you might meet another dog along the way, whatever. And then you get home, you get back inside, bring the dog in, take it off the leash, lock the door behind you, hopefully throw the poop out somewhere. As you think about that thought, that little movie playing in your mind, you realize that whole scene ended, first of all. And
Mm-hmm.
it took a mere like few seconds
Mm-hmm.
really to think about it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so let it play out in your mind instead of beating yourself up like, I can't think about my breath. I got to walk the dog. Think
Yeah.
about that as a movie scene in your mind of walking the dog. What happens at the end? Done. And then just return to the breath.
Nice. I've never heard that. And I've been like, I can't meditate. I like the way that you just described it. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm going to be having Diana Winston, who's just incredible, on the podcast on Wise Squirrels soon. And I've had others, Dr. Lydia Zalaskow. That episode was really worth listening to. She wrote the book about meditation and ADHD. So actually meditation for ADHDers. And that was fantastic. I've had Dr. Mark Burton, Dana Cruz are the two that come to mind right away that are experts at meditation and mindfulness. And so I've had that topic comes up a lot on my podcast, and it's worth tuning in for that.
Yeah. So what would you say of all of the things that you've learned would be the best takeaways that are really geared more towards my audience? I know your podcast is really towards a later life diagnosis, but I'm really focusing more on the even later than that, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is to give yourself grace. And that's universal. It doesn't matter how old you are. Like, it's understanding that as you learn about ADHD, you learn about how your brain works differently. And that's different is not bad. Different is just different. And as you learn about this stuff, you understand why you might become hyper fixated or hyper focused on a project that really is kind of silly and you should be doing something else, or why you might forget things, or why a list of different things. And the idea is to give yourself grace to understand that, okay, you know what? I'm out of steam. It's time to like just unplug or it's okay to just watch some TV or whatever it is that you want to do. Or if you're just talking too much and you're interrupting your friends all the time, or one-upping them with a story, like these are things that kind of happen sometimes with people with ADHD. And again, this stuff it's not universal, and ADHD it's different in different people, but there is common things. And yeah, so the number one thing I think is learn about it and then give yourself grace.
Sure. That's great advice. I learned from Wilma Fellman. I don't know if you've had her, but she has the term squirtle. Have you heard her use that before?
No.
I love it. She says, and it was such a good description. She said that she feels like she's part squirrel and part turtle. And I don't know about you, but I find that I go to do something or whatever, or I go, and then I hit my wall and I just want to retreat and I'm done. And that's my turtle. So I loved that description. Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
What is your best ADHD hack? Like, what would you say is the thing that makes you the most successful in working with your ADHD?
Oh, gosh. Well, besides meditating, because the meditation and mindfulness piece is extremely important because it helps you slow your mind down, right? And focus on the moment. And just in doing that, I think it can be incredibly helpful. From I work a lot in technology and tech stuff. I think putting your phone away is a wonderful idea, turning it off. I did this experiment for myself where I had my phone with me in a normal place that I go, and I was trying to brainstorm some stuff, and I would pick up my phone constantly. And so instead I decided I'm going to bring my journal and write down every thought that would have led me to pick up my phone. So I got to look up to research this idea. And then the idea makes me think of like an actor, or what movie was that actor in? Oh, it's, and all the things that I just wrote a list of like 10 or 15 things that I was thinking about instead of picking up the phone. And what happened in doing this was I realized, oh my gosh, like in 20 minutes of sitting there, I thought of like 15 things. And the truth is, had I picked up my phone for each thing, it probably would have taken 3 to 4 minutes per thing. And that would have been like 30, 40, 50 minutes of me on my phone. When I look back at the list, I'm like, this is all pointless. Like there might've been one thing of value on there worth looking into, which is fine. I had it written down. I could get back to it later, but I realized so much of it is so immediate. Oh, who's that actor? What movie was she in? Who directed that movie? And you're like on IMDb, and then you're searching, was that movie as good as I remember? Rotten Tomatoes. Let me see the review.
You're describing my life, Dave.
Yeah, yeah. So I think avoiding your phone sometimes is a good idea, or your computer. That temptation to just get online and try to find the answers, a lot of the times it turns out to be a bit of a waste of time.
That's awesome. Okay, that's really, really good. I've gotten some really good nuggets from you. I'm going to give you one. I don't know if you've heard of it,
Yeah.
but I would imagine that you ruminate or you go through the spiral of thoughts. Yes, I'm seeing a head nod.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I love this. I learned about doing a God box. And what you do is you put your worries into a box and you date them and put them away. And then you go back to that box later and you realize that all of these things that you worried about, most of them really never even happened, but at least you're giving that a place. So,
Oh, yeah. So is that like an actual physical box you're dropping something into, or is that, that's smart.
That is. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
This has been a great interview. Are there any, I always say, I don't know about you, but there's always like, I walk away and I'm like, oh, I wish I had said that. Is there anything, I wish I had said that, and anything you want to say to the audience? Because, you're being exposed to my audience and hopefully I'm getting exposed to yours.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. If you have questions, reach out. I'm always happy to answer questions. And check out Wise Squirrels. Let me know what you think. I would love your feedback. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can think of, Jami. It's just been so much fun, though. I mean, I think the work that you're doing is really it's really helpful. It's a great resource, especially for the best generation of people we have so much to learn from people older than us. And it takes a while sometimes in our lives to slow down enough to realize like, oh, yeah, I should be talking to people that are older than me because they have a lot more experience in life. And a lot of the lessons of life don't really change, or they're discovered as you get older, let's say. So.
Right. No, that's a big part of my why, is that we really, in our society generally, at least in the US, we really push aside people who are aging. We don't value. Everything is anti-aging. And we need to really change our language. And to your point, really like give them, they are wise and they have walked these paths and they can help us. And so anyway, that's a very big part of the work that I'm trying to do. I really, really appreciate you taking the time and your patience with me with all of my little hiccups.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Jami. This is awesome.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So if you tuned in and you want to learn more or join our growing community, you can find us at Grandma Has ADHD on Facebook. And if you like the podcast, leave us a review and subscribe and share it with your friends. Because this is, like I said, we are brand new. We are fledgling. Although all of these seniors have had ADHD hiding in plain sight, now we're finally talking about it. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much, Dave Delaney with Wise Squirrels. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.